Good morning, everyone. I'd like to call the meeting of the Coordinating Committee to order. As permitted by the Governor's Disaster Declaration of January 8th, 2021, the determination has been made that an in-person meeting is not practical or prudent for the committee to meet in person. To ensure a transparent and open meeting as possible, we will have posted the agenda and the materials approximately 1 week in advance of our meeting. We will provide a recording of this meeting linked to our website, and we'll take all votes by a roll call. Does staff have any additional items to announce before we start on the agenda?
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you. This meeting will be recorded. Please use your full name in the GoToMeeting platform. You can edit your name by clicking on the box next to your picture. Please use the mute function when not speaking. This will help us eliminate any excess background noise. For members of the public, if you have questions during the meeting, please utilize the chat box for those questions, and we will be monitoring that. If you are joining us by phone, we will be asking verbally if you have any questions at the end of the meeting. Members of the committee, when making a motion, please include your name so staff can properly record that. And that concludes my meeting announcements. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Stephanie. Appreciate that. Onto the agenda changes and announcements. Are there any agenda changes? Okay, thank you. Hearing none, we'll move on to announcements. Stephanie, are there any additional announcements this morning?
Yes, I believe that Executive Director Erin Allman is here to give some CMAP board updates, but I think that's actually later on in the agenda, so I don't think there's any other additional announcements.
Very good, very good. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Now we'll move on to the approval, excuse me, of the minutes. At this time, I'd like to combine the attendance roll call with the approval of the minutes. Can I get a motion and a second to approve the minutes of the February 10th, 2021 meeting? Please state your name and say so moved. A motion.
This is Sean Weidel. Oh. This is Sean Weidel. I'll second.
Very good. Thank you. Stephanie, did you get the first and the second?
I did not hear the first. Who?
Frank Beal.
Thank you, Frank.
Thank you. Thank you, Frank. Appreciate that. Are there any questions or corrections to the minutes? If there is nothing further, please take the roll call.
If the committee members could please unmute themselves at this time, and then I will read your names of the members. Please respond with present, and then yay, nay, or abstain with regards to the minutes when I call your name. Chairman Reinbold?
Aye.
Mayor Berkley? Frank Beal?
Present and yes.
Diane Williams? Harry Cohen?
Present and yay.
Jason Keller? Nancy Furfer?
Present and yay.
Chris Snyder?
Present, yes.
And Sean Weidel?
Present, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The motion carries.
Thank you, ma'am. Appreciate that. Next, under CMAP board meeting updates, we're very honored today to have our Executive Director, Erin Allman, with us to give us some updates to the committee. And at this time, I will turn it to Erin. Erin, welcome.
Thanks so much. I'm happy to be here. I'm excited to listen in on the discussion for the rest of the agenda here. I think many of you are aware I've been coming to committees as often as I can to sort of listen in, but also make sure that the work that the board and the coordinating committee are discussing makes it down, trickles down sort of through our tree of committees that we have here as a way to keep us all connected through COVID. And wanted to just give you some insights and thoughts that I had related to topics that you'll be talking about on your agenda, because many of you will hear my remarks for the board meeting, and I didn't want to have to hear those twice. But I wanted to just touch base on a couple things that were passed last board meeting, specifically related to equity and inclusion and the work that we're doing around equitable engagement of folks across our region. So last summer, I feel like we're sort of entering a point of deja vu where there's a continued reminder that, you know, there are a number of people across our region and our country that just don't have equal access to opportunity, you know, and their lives are much different than many of ours that have the opportunity to sort of sit around the table and talk about big policy picture things and infrastructure projects, right? And so part of the 2050 plan really was about identifying ways to make sure that our region was able to grow more inclusively, and that our role as a transportation planning organization was really to sort of start to think about what we might be able to do differently. And that was really accelerated, I think, you know, last summer, right, when organizations were putting out our statement, our board put out a really thoughtful statement on why it's important to think about, you know, the Black lives across our region, the Latinx lives across our region, and people with disabilities and how they engage in transportation planning. And so, you know, we started thinking about our core values. One of our core values is to pursue equity, but what does that actually mean tangibly? And so one of the things that we thought was important for us to do was to really, you know, really advance that core value, but also think about how we're expending our funds. I think you've seen, for those of you who've been engaged on our STP local program, that we've been able to bring in sort of equity measures to how we're programming those regionally significant transportation dollars. There's obviously more that we can be doing to, as an agency, to be able to address inequities. So the contract that we put out was approved last month around equitable engagement really is about helping us design a program to bring that equity lens to our specific projects and work. So whether that's an LTA project, I know that team does a very good job of developing engagement strategies, or whether it's thinking about the next long range plan that we'll be working on, or thinking about, you know, transportation programming. You know, we wanted to bring someone on who could help us really further our engagement with communities that don't typically have opportunity to do so. And part of the thought process here was really about the work that we've been doing with Elevated Chicago and around some of the transit stations that they have, and how they've been really thoughtfully engaging with community, not just community partners, but people who live in the community who might have a very different perspective of what it means to take transit in a neighborhood, or what it means to have access to a car or be located near an interchange. And there are places like this across our region. And so how do we know there's a lot of opportunity here, and we've been looking at that in the city, but through the Lens project, but we really want to be able to do that in, you know, I see Chris, so I'm going to say DuPage County, in Lake County, in Will County. There are communities that really haven't had a seat at the table across our region. So that's what this RFP was about, is about helping have some expertise in designing a program that then we could apply to different elements of our work, not just the LTA program, but our policy work as well. So let me pause right there. I wanted to touch on just two other quick things, but let's see if folks have thoughts or questions of me as we embark on this. I know you'll hear more about it in a little bit, and we'll have a discussion on this agenda.
Thank you, Erin. Are there any questions or comments from the members? Okay, very good. Erin, please proceed.
Thank you. So then two other things. So that's really focused on our external work. We also last month approved a contract with a consultant who's expert at looking at organizational diversity and inclusion and equity initiatives. So hiring, procurement, the policies that we have on the books that impact our employees. And so that contract will be signed here shortly. We've got Aon who will be helping, and they've got a local partner, a DBE business that will be partnering with them to come in and interview staff, talk about sort of policies and procedures here at CMAP. You know, we aren't expert at everything, so I think having some expertise and consult assistance on this will be really helpful for us as we think about, you know, what do we need to be thinking about when we're doing hiring? What haven't we what don't we know, I guess, essentially, right? I mean, there's lots of studies about if you see somebody's name, right, there's implicit bias in people who are reviewing resumes. So want to make sure that we are taking proactive steps to be able to address those issues here as we think about our staff here at CMAP as well. And then lastly, sort of on the same theme, I know that you all didn't meet last month, but, I've also been really proud of our team who put together sort of a last minute LTA call for projects. It was not an expected activity. And I think that we have selected 22 really great projects across the region with high need communities, which was really the focus here. So again, as we look at our opportunities to be able to really help communities prepare for funding opportunities that might be coming through the federal American Rescue Plan. I always forget which one is which, but making sure that our lowest capacity communities, highest need communities also have resources available to them. And so Stephanie and her team, I just wanted to commend her and the team for putting that call to project together jointly with the RTA. I think they did a really great job, and it shows that, we've been able to continue to support communities during COVID and try and find new and meaningful ways to pivot our work to be helpful to our community partners. So that concludes my remarks. I'm happy again to answer any questions or engage in any discussion items that the committee members might have.
Thank you, Erin. And I'm very pleased to hear our efforts on diversity and inclusion are moving forward. It's good that the organization, I believe, is being proactive on that topic. So thank you for those updates. Are there any other questions from the members? Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. And again, Erin, thank you for joining us this morning. Our next topic is the Berkley Prairie, Path and Taft Avenue Corridor Plan. I'll turn this to Stephanie to make introductions of the presenter. Stephanie?
Sure, absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is one of our LTA programs that we actually started during COVID. So there's been some really interesting innovations that the team has made as far as outreach and engagement with the community. And it's just, to me, a really great example of how, even though we've been working remotely, we've still been able to continue our mission and working with our communities to really help them move things forward for better quality of life in their community. So with that, I'll turn it over to the project team that's with us today. We have Tony Mano, who's a senior planner, and then Katie as well, who is part of the project management team. So I will turn it over to the two of you, Tony and Katie.
Good morning, Chairman Reinbold and members of the coordinating committee. I'm Tony Mano, your planner at CMAP, and I'm excited to give you a status update on the Prairie Path and Taft Avenue Corridor Plan, which is a project through our Technical Assistance Program in partnership with the villages of Berkley and Hillside and the Berkley Park District. I'm joined today by my project teammate and associate planner, Katie Petrowska. This presentation will briefly outline the work our team has accomplished over the past year to examine and analyze the existing conditions in the study area, as well as summarize feedback we have received thus far from local stakeholders on ways to improve the study area over time. For a bit of background, the villages of Berkley and Hillside and the Berkley Park District applied to CMAP during the 2018 call for projects for assistance exploring economic development and improved access opportunities along and around the Illinois Prairie Path Trail at Taft and Electric Avenues. We selected this project because of this great multi-jurisdiction partnership and the opportunities for growth in the area.
Our study area is bounded by Burr Oak Avenue and Hawthorne Avenue to the north, Wolf Road to the east, Warren Avenue to the south, and I-294 to the west. The study area was proposed by the project partners and is the focus of our existing conditions analysis and community outreach. However, feedback from stakeholders outside of the study area is always welcome. The Prairie Path and Taft Avenue Corridor Plan will focus on economic development, transportation, placemaking, and development opportunities. However, we are open to exploring other areas that may arise from conversations with project partners, stakeholders, and the community at large. Our planning process thus far has involved an analysis of existing conditions, as well as ongoing community engagement to identify stakeholder priorities for our study area. As Tony mentioned, in the following slides, I will provide a brief overview of the existing conditions of our study area and talk a bit more about our community engagement process and the feedback we have received thus far. To learn more about who lives in our study area, we examined a number of demographic data points. Looking at this data helped us understand the context of our project and will help us ensure that recommendations in the future fit the context of the community. In addition to examining demographic data, we looked at the area's economic data to get a better understanding of the current economic conditions. We examined data points like the unemployment rate, as well as median household income, and the total businesses and employees. This data will help us come up with recommendations that are rooted in market realities. Our economic development data analysis showed that there are low vacancy rates for retail properties in our study area, specifically along the Taft Avenue corridor. However, that is due to the fact that very little retail currently exists there. A retail gap analysis uncovered opportunities for neighborhood scale services, including small scale restaurants. And we also found that the Taft Avenue corridor faces competition from larger retail corridors along Butterfield Road and St. Charles Road. In terms of transportation, we found that the area is well connected to the surrounding communities as well as the city of Chicago through the Union Pacific West Metro line, as well as several paved bus routes. We found that most streets in the study area have a sidewalk on both sides, which is great for pedestrians that may be in the area using the Prairie Path Trail. And we found that the average daily traffic counts along Electric Avenue and Taft Avenue are relatively low compared to other major corridors, which again is great for bicyclists and pedestrians that may be in the area using the Prairie Path Trail. The last topic area of our existing conditions analysis examines natural resources. Berkley Park is an important natural resource in our study area, and the Illinois Prairie Path plays an important role in connecting residents to a larger network of open space. We examined access to parks for Berkley and Hillside residents as a whole, and found that there may be opportunities to increase access to open space for residents of our study area. We also examined potential flooding issues using CMAP's flood susceptibility index and found that the area currently has moderate flood susceptibility. This means that flooding may not be an issue overall, but there may be some localized areas of flooding due to stormwater runoff, which presents opportunities for integrating green infrastructure to mitigate some of that runoff. In addition to analyzing data, we have been conducting community engagement to learn more about some of the challenges and opportunities of our study area. So far, we have been able to engage stakeholders through our virtual engagement page, which is shown on the slide, as well as stakeholder interviews and a steering committee meeting. We have engaged a variety of stakeholders and groups, including residents, local business owners, elected officials, Illinois Prairie Path board members, and the Illinois Tollway. Our virtual engagement page, which has been active since last fall, offers a number of tools for stakeholders to provide their input on the future of our study area. These tools include a survey, an interactive mapping tool, and a discussion forum that allows stakeholders to provide ideas about the future of the Prairie Path and Taft Avenue corridor. To date, we've had more than 100 stakeholders engage with at least one tool on our page. In the next few slides, I'll go over some of the feedback we've received so far in more detail. Displayed on the slide are the results of two of our polling questions that were on our engagement page. The first question asks stakeholders how they primarily use the Prairie Path, and the vast majority answered that they use it for running and walking, while about a quarter stated that they use it for cycling. Another question we asked had to do with the Taft Avenue corridor, and we wanted to know what types of businesses or services stakeholders would like to see along Taft Avenue. The vast majority here answered a coffee shop, while another 22% said a fast casual restaurant. This slide displays the results of some of our survey questions. These questions focused on improvements to the bicycling and walking environment in the study area, as well as streetscape improvements. In terms of walking and biking, most survey takers said that they regard trail maintenance and lighting as the most important component. And in terms of streetscape improvements, landscape beautification and benches were regarded as the most important. Some of the ideas that have been submitted through our engagement page are shown on the slide here. We found that many stakeholders are submitting similar ideas, and there seems to be some consensus about the types of improvements that should take place. A common theme throughout the engagement process has been the desire for better lighting along the Prairie path, as well as the addition of native plants or gardens along the trail. Many stakeholders are interested in having a coffee shop on Taft Avenue that can serve both residents and trail users. And there's a lot of interest in streetscape improvements that can make Taft Avenue a better pedestrian experience. Other ideas that we've heard include better bike connections to the metro station, which is currently about a mile from the study area, and a concert space in Berkley Park that can offer a diverse range of programming. With the help of the project steering committee and the villages of Berkley and Hillside, we will prioritize some of the ideas we received so far and draft a key recommendations memo based on community feedback. Once our key recommendations are drafted, we will move into community visioning to ensure that any recommendations we further develop are in line with the community's vision for the future of our study area. With that, I'd like to thank you all for listening to our presentation, and I would like to open it up for discussion and any questions that you all might have.
Thank you. Great presentation. At this time, I'd like to open it to any comments or questions or input from the committee members. Okay, great. Well, great job. No questions. That means you guys are doing okay. Thank you.
I had a question.
Oh, certainly, Frank. Go ahead.
Yeah, what about the financial side of where these improvements might come from? Is it local investment, any kind of TIF district? Is there any discussion of how you would finance some of these improvements?
Good question.
Yeah, that's a great question. I guess for one of the improvements that the stakeholders would like to see, trail lighting, the village of Berkley actually is planning on having basically some money set aside for that. So that's one trail improvement that is already kind of in the works that we know will get implemented. But I will kick it over to Tony for any other ideas on financing. We have been thinking about that, and that's definitely part of our implementation efforts to make sure that these things can get implemented.
Thanks, Katie. Good morning, everybody. Yes, Katie's exactly right. I think part of our the process, once we get the key recommendations together and get feedback or consensus from everybody, and that means both communities, part of our recommendations will include how to finance the recommendations that we suggest. The Village of Berkley has put some money in their budget for the their next fiscal year to focus on some near-term improvements as well. But I think looking at a TIF district might be one of many options that I think we'll present to them. And typically when we do that, we just say, here are a list of types of ways you can fund these types of things.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thanks for the question, Frank. Appreciate that.
Oh, yep. Jason, it sounds like you're very garbled when you're talking, but I see you have your hand up.
I think we're still having audio problems.
Jason, maybe if you wanted to utilize the chat box too, we can ask your question for you. Yep, looks like he's already ahead of us. It looks like Chris has a question in the meantime.
Chris, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Really not a question, but a comment. Or
So DuPage County was awarded a UWP grant for a trails plan. But we are actually looking at the Illinois Prairie Path and Great Western Trail and our Southern DuPage Trail as part of a large effort. And so I think I'd like to, we're in the process of bringing a consultant on board for that effort. And I think, there'd be, certainly some synergies here between what we're doing on one side of the county line and what's being done on the other side of the county line. So, I would like to Tony and Katie, maybe, engage you in our process to make sure that we're working collaboratively together, so there isn't this transition. The county line defines the limit of one scenario into another scenario, and so we're looking at our paths. Is it transformational? Is it just a transportation corridor, or is it something more? We have a 100-foot right-of-way out there, and certainly with COVID, we have more people teleconferencing and working while walking on the path, and so maybe something outside the box. And so we'd be really interested in what you're doing in Hillside and Berkley, and maybe bring some of that synergy or those opportunities into DuPage, so to speak, but also share with you what we're doing. So John Loper's ahead of that, so I'll let him know we had this update today and share your contact information. I'm sure he has it already, and maybe just start a collaboration.
Yeah, I think that would be great. We're definitely interested in, these improvements kind of going beyond our study area, and making sure that, the path it crosses boundaries and municipal and county boundaries. So yeah, I think that would be great.
Very good. One just a thought on the possible funding mechanism for this. I don't know if this community has a business district tax, but that might be another source of revenue that they might consider if they don't have that on the books. Thank you. Hey, is there anything? Yeah, you're welcome. Is there anything else?
Yeah, I do have Jason's question from the chat that I'll post for the group.
Great.
So he's saying, with this project and our discussion of inclusion this morning, how might have this project, I'm trying to read this out here. How might this project be improved, the Prairie Path been adjusted to bring in underrepresented groups? So let me rephrase that. So I think what he's asking is, what efforts have we taken to really look at underrepresented groups, and how are we giving them a voice? Which I know we have done some innovative things this time around. So Katie and Tony, maybe you could cover that a little bit.
Sure. So in terms of our engagement, like Stephanie mentioned before, this project basically is happening, through the pandemic. So a lot of our engagement has been virtual. But we did have, for example, printed out surveys at the library, at the local library, and have been getting quite a bit of responses. So, we're basically targeting people who maybe don't use the internet or technology that much, or maybe don't have access to it. So we have been getting, I think, 70 or 60 responses just through the paper surveys. So that's kind of one way that we're thinking about, inclusion in the engagement process. And I think as the weather gets warmer, we're also hoping to maybe put out some posters along the path so that people can interact with them in person if they're not kind of comfortable with using technology, or maybe don't have the expertise. So we are thinking about ways to engage people, in different ways to kind of get a holistic picture of what kind of improvements people would like to see.
And then one thing I'll add to that too is we worked with the local school district as well to get the word out about the project and our engagement page, and also the Proviso Health Partners, which works at Proviso East High School, which is technically outside of our study area boundary, but those students use the path as well. So we were able to reach to some of the high school students as well. So we really utilized a lot of our connections in the area to get the word out. I'm also from the area, so I called in a lot of favors from my friends that actually teach there too, and they were able to help us out. So I'd like to think that our engagement has actually gone pretty far and wide, even in a virtual setting. Thanks, Jason.
Yeah, and the youth outreach is always a hard one to accomplish, but I think that's been one that there's been a lot of effort here, and I think some of that's paid off. And then, really going back to the paper surveys, which I think was really, sometimes you think about how to be more inclusive as you need to utilize the latest technology, but sometimes it's about going back to, tried and true methods. So I think that was a brilliant strategy. One other item I wanted to just add, Chris, to your comment is one of the things we've talked about, because we really want to think about implementation throughout the entire process, is that we think once we get through this, we'd like to utilize one of our new approaches of community cohort or community consortiums, and actually start to bring communities together that front on the Prairie Path and try to help them work together to have more of a cohesive strategy for that amenity that they all have, including how do they apply for funding, how do they have a familiar aesthetic, is there things they can do with marketing. There's so many things that can happen if those communities sort of work together. So that's another implementation effort that we're thinking of once we conclude this plan.
Curious, I know in DuPage County, the county owns the Prairie Path. It's actually designated a county highway. What happens when we go into Cook County? Is it owned by a specific entity, or is it municipal owned in those areas?
I think it's a combo.
Combo?
Sorry, I believe it is a combo. I think the Berkley Park District has some right of way in Berkeley, and I believe Hillside is the same story. And I think it changes as it goes even further east.
Okay.
The other challenge we have too is Taft Avenue is an IDOT road, the north-south street that bifurcates the study area. And I say challenge because I think some folks in Hillside and Berkeley would like to have bike lanes along Taft Avenue, but it's also a truck route. So that's an issue that we're addressing right now, and we're addressing it with IDOT too, and IDOT's been super helpful.
Very good. We have a question.
Yeah, this is Sherry Cohen. I think this is great. I think it'd be great to monitor sort of what people that live right around there, if their exercise, once it's implemented, or where they are with their status of their exercise in general, and how they're using this. And then really that data will also help be able to get additional funding or other locations to be able to increase the regular exercise for their community members.
Yeah, that's a great point. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Are there any closeout questions or comments? Okay, great. Tony and Katie, thank you very much for the presentation, and thank the committee for your input. We appreciate that. It's very valuable. Our next topic is Equitable engagement programs. Staff will give us a presentation on the overview and highlight some of the upcoming activities and seek input from the committee. In your packet and on your agenda, we have been presented with a few questions that staff is looking for input on. And after the presentation, would like the committee members to provide input on those questions. At this time, Leslie, I'd like you to please introduce our presenters.
Sure. Aaron did a great job of queuing up this particular agenda item. We're hitting the ground running. This was just at the board meeting last month for the procurement approval, but this is a very timely subject, so we're already working towards this. So Elizabeth Scott and Ryan Tomko will be presenting this item today.
Thanks, Stephanie. Good morning, everyone. As Stephanie mentioned, I'm Elizabeth Scott. I'm a principal policy analyst in our Plan Implementation and Legislative Affairs division. Some of you I've worked with very closely over the years. This will just passed over my 5th year at CMAP, but I'm a little less than 1 year into this principal role. I am the program manager for this project, so the supervising principal, and I'm joined by my colleague Ryan Tomko, who is a senior analyst who is also in the PILA division, who's been with us almost a year at this point. And, this project is something that we're really excited about and delighted to discuss with you today and get your thoughts about how we can strengthen it, because we really are at the beginning of this work. Next slide, please. And so Aaron gave a terrific background, and I'll just underscore a couple of things that she said. So that the 2050 plan really calls on us through the inclusive growth principle to do what we can to create a more inclusive region. More inclusive, less inequitable regions are more prosperous. And then if the experience of COVID and the last, almost 2 years now has taught us anything, that, it's really important to roll up our sleeves and try to live these principles. We know, study after study has shown that when more people are involved in the decision-making process, particularly people who are directly impacted by the decisions being made, the better the solutions you can generate are. So this project is really about figuring out how we can supplement the terrific outreach and engagement efforts that CMAP already undertakes with some sustained, targeted work to identify, recruit, and sustain participation from people and groups that represent our region's diversity and who come from a variety of different kinds of marginalized communities, so that we can have these voices at the table throughout all of our processes. We're envisioning this, if we're successful in this first effort, as something that could become a permanent program, a permanent feature of the work that we do. Next slide, please. And, part of this work is going to be acknowledging the role that government has played and, in fact, still plays in the distribution of advantage and disadvantage in our country. Government has a role to play in issues of systemic racism, and it's important for us to own and acknowledge that, because by doing that, we can start to work through it. I mean, you think of issues, for instance, like slavery, access to the right to vote, redlining, the location of where we constructed our highways, to exclusionary zoning and land use decisions. And we could have a much longer conversation about what this list of things are, but there are a lot of things that government in the past has had a role in. And in many cases, these systems are kind of through inertia existing in the current day. And it's really an activity that we have to undertake to look at the way things work and ask if it can be better. And so we're also hoping through this program to, find some people to help us think more deeply about this and to help us really gut check our processes and decisions. And this is going to be one piece of a variety of efforts that we either have already undertaken or are about to start undertaking to build out the equity space more at CMAP. Next slide. And in this particular project, we have a lot of federal responsibilities that are related to it. Starting with Title VI of the 1964 Civil Rights Act, entities that receive federal funds have responsibility to look at how these funds benefit and burden different members of our communities. This, body of law has been built on over the years through different acts, including notably an executive order during the Clinton years, as well as recently as January of this year, the first executive order President Biden's administration put out is entitled Advancing Racial Equity and Support for Underserved Communities Through the Federal Government. And it was very timely because we were already off to the races with this project when the executive order came out. But it's really about how, and I'll read here just so I make sure I get this right. It requires federal agencies to consult with members of communities that have been historically underrepresented in the federal government and underserved by or subject to discrimination in federal policies and programs. The agencies must evaluate opportunities consistent with applicable law to increase coordination, communication, and engagement with community-based organizations and civil rights organizations. So we had something very similar in mind for this program. So the timing, it turns out, is really good. And so just with that slight introduction, I'm going to turn it over to Ryan He'll give you more details on what we really have in mind for this program, and then we'll have a Q&A period where we're happy to discuss anything that you all want to discuss about this program. And then if time permits, get to some of the questions on your agenda that we, also have interest in. So thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. As Elizabeth mentioned earlier, my name is Ryan Tomto. I'm a senior analyst here at CMAP, and I'm CMAP's project manager for this project. So at this point, we're going to transition away from project background and dive more into an overview of what the project will actually entail. So next slide, please. This project will utilize a consultant to design and execute a program to enhance engagement and participation by environmental justice communities, and which meets the requirements of Title VI and MPO and the other MPO activities. CMAP's goal is to build stronger relationships with environmental justice communities and directly engage community members and organizations in long-range planning and program activities. CMAP will provide financial support in the form of stipends to organizations representing marginalized communities so that they can participate more fully in CMAP's federally funded planning initiatives. Initiatives could include, but are not limited to, participation in CMAP working committees and resource groups, as well as more specialized participation in project meetings. It can also include review of documents related to CMAP's ongoing efforts across transportation, economic, and environmental areas, and the ONTO 2050 update. It is anticipated that this work will supplement CMAP's engagement activities on identified projects. Next slide, please. So Elizabeth mentioned the various requirements that CMAP has when it comes to our federal funding. And in order to align with these requirements, participants will be selected from organizations that represent communities that have been historically underrepresented in and underserved by government policies and programs. Participation from organizations located in different jurisdictions across northeastern Illinois is a central component of the program. Appropriate community organizations may include, but are not limited to, those that are listed here on this slide. Next slide, please. To build a program from scratch, CMAP sought out a partner to design a regionally representative engagement program and implement the program by providing stipends for the cohort of participating organizations. A request for proposals was issued seeking a consultant team with specialized expertise in equitable engagement to help design and implement the program over a 36-month period. Next slide, please. The RFP was posted on CMAP's website on December 1st, 2020, and interviews were held on January 15th. After the interviews, the selection committee reached consensus to recommend the Center for Neighborhood Technology, or CNT, as the contractor for the Equitable Engagement Program. On March 3rd, the CMAP board approved a contract with CNT for the not-to-exceed amount of $500,000. Support for this project will be provided by FY21 and FY22, fiscal year 21 and fiscal year 22, UWP funding, in addition to potentially a SPR grant from IDOT for this purpose. And so that brings us to the present with project kickoff meetings being held this month. Next slide, please. The Center for Neighborhood Technology will lead a team of sub-consultants, including Daylight, Borderless Studio, and the Urban Transportation Center, who will provide support for different phases of the project. This team has worked together on numerous projects before and shares a commitment to equity, enthusiasm for the project, and experience conducting similar work. But an important element of this is that we're not looking to hand this work over to a consultant to do it for us and then present it to us. Instead, we're looking for a partner who can build this program from scratch together with CMAP. So on that end, CMAP has put together a cross-divisional team of staff to ensure a variety of perspectives are brought to the table to ensure that we're building a robust program that will last into the future. Next slide, please. The development of the Equitable Engagement Program is divided into 4 tasks. The schedule is laid out here on this slide. The first task is program design, which will involve the consultant team working in partnership with CMAP to develop an engagement program. This task will take approximately 8 months to complete. Workshops will be held with CMAP staff, and a selection of community groups will be interviewed to better understand the goals of the program. The deliverable of the first task will be set will be a set of guiding principles for the program, a memo detailing the design of the program, and document templates for implementing the program. Task 2 will involve recruitment and selection of participants for the program per the priorities defined in the program design task. This task will include an education and awareness component that will help ensure participating community groups understand the regional planning process. This task will take approximately 4 to 6 months to complete. Task 3 involves processing and tracking stipend payments to participating community groups. This is really a critical element of the program, as the program must satisfy the requirements that come with federal funding. Several deliverables will be produced as part of Task 3, including the documentation of all of those program expenses that demonstrate that every dollar spent on the program was used appropriately. A closeout memo will be provided that documents lessons learned and a plan for how to continue this program beyond this initial 3-year time frame of the contract. Finally, for Task 4, the Urban Transportation Center at UIC will provide an independent evaluation of the program to determine whether the program has achieved its goals. An evaluation report will identify implementation challenges, adaptations, and process outcomes. Based on qualitative data and best practices, it will generate recommendations for future institutionalizing community group engagement within CMAP. As you can imagine, there are a lot of questions that will need to be answered as we move forward with designing the Equitable Engagement Program. On the next slide, we have included a few questions that we'd like to pose to the committee for discussion. And so here, as I mentioned earlier, the Equitable Engagement Program will be designed to draw participants from across the 7 counties to ensure a regional perspective is provided. Part of that process will be to decide what types of community groups should be selected to participate. So our first question for the committee is who should make up this universe of regional community groups that CMAP might engage?
I'd like to open it to the committee for a response. I'll offer my first response on that. I think a very valuable partner would be our local councils of government. There's always the opportunity to do brief presentation at the COG meetings. So that would be one suggestion I would offer.
The other thing I know in DuPage County, for the county of DuPage, we have a community services department that actually then serves as the liaison to a number of the marginalized groups we talked about. So, through one contact, you might be able to get a lot of information and then direct, at least within DuPage, direct any efforts towards specific, underserved, marginalized communities.
Good point. Other input? Okay, really on this question and the other questions that staff's presented, there's always the opportunity to provide input at a later date via email and direct contact with our staff. So I just wanted to make sure that we were all aware of that opportunity.
And, we're interested in these questions, but we're interested in any questions or reactions that you might have to the program as well.
Great.
I have a question. This seems to be very focused on this effort maybe toward identifying these groups and engaging them. As I read as I looked at heard the presentation, is it really directed toward their involvement in the CMAP regional planning process? And if so, that's fine. But is there a subset of this that as we do project-specific or county-specific regional planning, that kind of an offshoot of this might be some guidance and I don't know, a how-to manual or something that we could then take advantage of, to continue to engage those groups, not just at the regional level, but at the local level, and then I would say even at the project level.
That is an awesome idea, and you probably hear tip, 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 because I am writing it down. I think. All
right, then I'm done. One good idea.
Great.
I think if we can stand up a good program, that there's a lot of potential replicability here and a lot of different ways that we could use it throughout the region. So that's a very exciting idea from DuPage.
I will say from Chicago, we've been involved with a lot of environmental justice groups lately. So I don't think we should shy away from that at all. But like the NRDC is a more national group, but they have local, efforts here. There's a number of different organizations like the Little Village Environmental Justice Group. I'm not sure the exact name. And there are a number of groups, and also just, I'm not very familiar, but maybe some Native American groups to make sure to get feedback and engagement throughout the region, I think are important. So I think once you start engaging some of these groups, you'll be able to find more groups that are working locally and regionally.
Yeah, thank you. That's a great idea. I think, and at least on my mental list, the American Indian Center definitely where some folks will think about reaching out to. But, one of the things that we're hoping to do with CNT is really walk through all these considerations with them and try and come up through dialogue with some ideas that work, and then test those ideas with some of our community partners to make sure that as we're coming out and engaging with people more, that it's like respectful, helpful, engaging, and useful for them as well as us. So I can kind of, we're not entirely sure what form things will take yet, is my point.
Elizabeth, how do you see this interacting with the work that CNT is already doing with like their transportation equity network, kind of in that transportation specific work?
That's a great question. One of the reasons that they were attractive as a vendor to us is the experience and investment that CNT already has in that network. So I imagine that there will be some overlap, but this is something that will be housed in CMAP for hopefully the long term if we design something that everyone is happy with, and we'll have a regional reach, whereas the 10 network is really much more City of Chicago and Cook County focused.
Right. And then my other comment, I would reiterate what Chris said, which is how-to manual or best practices is definitely would be valuable to other agencies and organizations, such as CDOT, for example.
That's great. And Ryan mentioned that we're thinking about having a capacity building and education component as part of this. I could see that as being really useful to partners because when we ask people to come to the table, we want to make sure that they have the information that they need to be able to, engage in the discussion that we're trying to have, because it's not a productive discussion to ask somebody about something that is detailed and technical that they don't know what it is.
Right.
So I imagine that we'll create some good stuff through that as well.
Great. Thanks.
Sorry. I really like, I'll just quickly, I really like that you're making sure that there's capacity building at CMAP, and just to encourage as you continue to build up your team that it represents an equitable and diverse team, because I think that will help CMAP in the capacity building in the long term.
Very good. I think Nancy had a comment. Thank you, Sherry.
Yes, as you're thinking about community groups, there's a number of Latino organizations. You've got the Latino Policy Forum, Latinos United. There's a number of them. There's some up in Lake County. I'm trying to think, Amano. So there's a number of them around which will help. And also townships do serve, they're responsible supposedly for social service provisions with federal dollars that come through. So so they hopefully understand the needs of, and then as you're looking at seniors, you've got AARP, which has been outreaching to communities, as well as you're looking at the disabled communities. There's big one just escapes me the name, but
Access Living.
Access
Living. It was Elizabeth. So I think if you're looking to include all these diverse type populations, there are organizations out there that specifically know the needs.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Nancy. Thank you. Sorry, please go ahead.
Oh, no, I was going to say I would also add student groups. I think especially college student groups. I know I had a conversation last week with a a young black woman from UIC and who's in their master's program who's thinking about specializing in transportation. And my response to her was, yes, please, because this industry is generally looks a little bit too much like me, a lot too much like me, quite frankly, historically, moving in the right direction. But the more we can actually encourage people to get into this field to look less like me and are more diverse, I think is a great thing to consider as well.
Very good. Great. Thank you, Sean.
I'll just
Super.
remind everybody that we have internships. So if you meet these people, you should let them know that.
Great idea. Great idea. Thank you. This is great input. Thank you to all the committee members that are participating in the discussion. Is there any closeout comments or questions on this topic? Okay, great. Thank you, Elizabeth and Ryan. Thank you for the presentation. It was a good discussion. Appreciate that. We will move to our next item, which is committee updates and discussion. We've provided a link on committee updates to our webpage that contain a summary of the CMAP's committee activities, and this has been distributed to all the committee members via email. Is there any input or comment on this topic? Stephanie, don't know if you have anything to add to that, or if you have any questions or feedback from the board.
Nothing to add, Mr. Chair, just if any of the other representatives had any announcements or updates they wanted to make about their particular committees.
I would like to talk about just briefly what we did at our last Land Use and Housing Committee. We actually had breakouts on a project that CMAP is engaged in, and boy, it was really engaged the community members, and it helped those of us that are working on the project get input on going forward. So just wanted to say that it was successful, and I hope other committees will try that as well.
Great, thank you, Nancy.
This is Sherry. Oh, this is Sherry. We just had our Human Community Development Committee yesterday. So I think, and we got some of the similar information, but not all of it. I just wanted to share that we are having committee members share on the work that they're doing in general, and that the work that they're doing, especially during this time of COVID, and in focusing on inequities. And we had Lori Dittman talk about Mayor's Office for People with Disabilities for the City of Chicago. And I just, we all were, that was important to make sure to look at and just bring something out with economic development and equitable economic work to ensure that people that with disabilities are considered in this effort. She was talking about the number of workshops that pay less than minimum wage, and some work to really address this and try to end this practice. I think the City of Chicago is working on that. So I think that's an important component for us all to think about. So thank you.
Very good, thank you. Okay, further comment or updates from any of the other committees? Great, thank you. We'll move to our next topic, which is other business. Is there any new business to come before the committee today? Okay, hearing none, we'll move to public comment. Staff will at this time read any comments that we've received prior to today's meeting and recognize those speakers in the chat box. Stephanie, have we had any comments or questions submitted to the committee?
Mr. Chair, staff did not receive any comments prior to today's meeting, and at this time there are no questions in the chat box. If there is anyone joining us by phone, if you could speak now if you have questions for the committee. Hearing none, then Mr. Chair, it appears that there are no individuals wishing to address the committee this morning.
Very good. Thank you, Stephanie. Appreciate that. If there is no other public comment, our next meeting is scheduled for June 9th at 8 a.m. Following our June meeting, we will be meeting on the second Wednesdays in both September and November, again at 8 a.m. Before we adjourn, is there anything else from either the committee members or staff to bring before the committee? Okay, thank you. Hearing none, again, thank you for joining us today. We have very good participation on this committee, and I appreciate that. The input for our staff is very valuable, and appreciate you taking the time to provide us with your input. Hearing nothing further at this point in time, we will adjourn our meeting. Thank you all. We appreciate it again. Have a good day.
Thank you,